work session comes to order. First order of business, every year we have to, is it appoint or elect?
Appoint.
Appoint president, vice president, treasurer, and corporate secretary per state laws. So that would be Tom Judson as president, Doug McCash as vice president, Tammy Lloyd as secretary, and Dwayne Mitchell as treasurer. So we will be voting on that next week in the regular monthly meeting. Any questions on that? Good. Next, regarding the open seat on the board, we have asked for resumes. Those interested in, should I read it?
I can do
Okay, go ahead.
it. Those interested in applying for the open board position, have until May 31st to submit. I'm sorry. They would serve until May 31st, 21. The critical dates: you need to submit your application or your resume by June 30th, close of business. Interviews will take place on July 7th in the afternoon. You can conduct those interviews either in person or via Zoom. And then, assuming that the board comes to a consensus, the board would vote to confirm that at the July 23rd regular meeting.
And there you have it. The next item is...
Excuse me, David. Tom, can you explain why we have to go through the resume process? I've gotten a lot of member questions of why we wouldn't just appoint the next person from the last election and the reason behind doing this.
Well, maybe Doug can jump in, but the way the governing documents stipulate is that it states that you have to submit a resume and that you will be interviewed. Doug is probably not giving you enough time to find that.
Oh, that's all right.
Provision.
Yeah, it says in the policies that in order to be considered for an open position on the board, someone who is interested would submit a resume and they would be interviewed by the board of directors to fill that position. You can take into consideration all of those factors that you mentioned. You know, if they ran before and they're still interested in being appointed for that, then they would indicate their interest by submitting a resume. That's just the way it's spelled out in the policies.
Thank you.
I would just like to ask also, we have received a lot of letters and emails requesting that we reinstate Steve McGee. Is that something that we're not going to consider as a new board?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted the question asked.
Yeah. As I have said before, that was the decision of the previous board. We have a new board now, and hasn't been a consideration.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because neither Jan nor I ever were given the details as to why he was removed, so we can't really speak towards
that's
the
correct.
issue.
That's correct. It was a matter that was before a previous board during an executive session, which has confidentiality. So even as board members now, you may never probably learn exactly what happened.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Next item, Tom. Charitable Giving Committee.
So we have a couple committee nominations. We have the Charitable Giving Committee, Tom and Bob, for a second 3-year term, and Tony and John for a second 2-year term. That way we'll have some level of staggering on this committee. And then for the Recreation Committee, they have nominated Scott for an initial 3-year term. So those would be brought to the attention of the board at the next meeting. I know that at least the Recreation Committee has some additional openings that they are working on, and we would probably bring it to the attention of the board at the July meeting.
Okay, next item up that we will be considering next week are the amended policies and bylaws. Tom has prepared information so that we can see exactly what each policy or bylaw is addressing and what the changes might be, and give us a little bit of background for this. Tom?
So, well, first of all of the proposed changes are available on the POA's website in the governance section. So if you'd like to read the changes in their totality, you can find it on our website. The first one is 2.05. Now, on all of these, the board is required to vote on them twice. So the board voted on them, let's call it the previous board voted on them last month, and then the new board, if you'd like to call it that, will vote on it this month. After 2 votes, then it becomes policy. So this is the second vote for all of these. And the first one is policy 2.05, which is the regulation of common land, common property for hunting. And the primary change here is that we're eliminating hunting on ARKMO, since the POA no longer owns the land. Now, like I said, on some of these, Doug has gone through and cleaned up some of the language and so forth. So that's why I encourage everybody to read the entire document for themselves, all the changes, because if the summary does not cover everything or does not focus on something enough, take it upon yourself to read through it in case my summary is not sufficient. The next policy, actually bylaw, is Bylaw 6, which is board directors' meetings. The primary change here is changing where proxies can be submitted digitally. So if a board member is not in attendance, they can give a proxy to one of their fellow board directors and have them act upon the vote on their behest. So that's the main change there. The next one is Bylaw 11, which is meeting of the members. So when you think about meeting of the members, think about mainly when votes are taken. So the election of board members, the assessment increase vote that we had earlier this year. So the main change here is, so there's 3 ways you can submit your ballot proxy, okay? You can do it electronically, you can do it by paper, or you can show up to the meeting. Typically, the meetings start at 6 o'clock, and there tends to be about a half-hour process from the time that you turn in that ballot. It's got to go to TIE, and they got the inspectors of election, and they have to process it. They have to verify that you're a member in good standing. They have to recalculate everything. It takes about a half an hour. And so in previous years, we've seen situations where we accepted ballots all the way up to the last minute, and the meeting started late because the inspectors of election were calculating everything, and we then had to update the information into the presentation. So what this is saying is, you can hand in your paper ballot, you can walk it in, but you got to bring it at least 30 minutes beforehand. And that's a reasonable amount of time, and then that allows the inspectors of election to process that ballot the proper way, to make sure that there's no errors, and to make sure that we start the meeting on time. So the Rules and Regulations Committee felt that a 30-minute time frame was a reasonable amount of time for a person to process it. And keep in mind that even in elections where we have a large amount of participation, we get maybe 5 people will walk in a ballot. This last one, for the board election, we had nobody turn in their ballot. So it's important that we allow people to walk their ballots in, but it's not a critical issue. The next one.
Will that go
is-
for digital
I'm
as
sorry.
well? Will digital voting, online voting stop 30 minutes before the meeting as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, I think they stop it at 5. Is that correct?
It's disclosed in the instructions, but it's 5:30, same time.
Now, the cutoff, I'm sorry, on the cutoff on the paper ballots that are mailed in, that's beforehand, because that's a lot longer processing timeframe. But if you look at the ballot proxy, it will stipulate exactly what the deadline is. And we just encourage people to submit their ballot proxies well ahead of time, Vote early, don't hold on to it to the last minute. Any other questions? Okay. The next one is the reservation of amenities and fee policy. So the one thing that this change does, it talks about association guests. Now, what I encourage you to do is put policy 2.02 and 3.04 next to each other because they interconnect, okay? So for policy 2.02, you have association guests, and it stipulates that association guests are limited to certain areas. For example, restaurants, golf, tennis, Metfield Skills Park, Canyard Creek Park, Blowing Springs, and other paved and unpaved trails open to the general public. Okay, so that sentence started with association guests. You actually have to go to 3.04 to get a full understanding what an association guest is. So remember, look at those two together, but we'll stick to 2.02 for right now. So if you recall, in the 2020 plan, we had the brochure, and we had the left side was closed to the public and the right side was open, or to non-members and to members only, and non-members could participate. And the stuff on the right-hand side, which was golf and tennis and so forth, that was on the right-hand side. So what this is doing, policy 2.0, the changes to policy 2.02 and the changes to policy 3.04 are codifying or putting into policy what occurred as a result of the 2020 plan being approved. So this stipulates that these are the things that they're limited to. It also stipulates that amenity use fees will be charged in certain instances, and stipulates that members get priority over guests. Any further questions on this?
I don't have a question, but I have a statement. As I mentioned before, I do have a problem with changing the word facility to amenities. I think that the two words are totally different in definition, and I think that we rent out facilities. We rent out a park pavilion. We are not renting out an entire park. We rent out Lake Point, but we're not renting out a lake. So I object to removing facility and changing it all to amenities.
So let me ask you a point of clarification. So let's talk about the gun range. So in clarifying amenity versus facility, the gun range, when we have a shootout there, is that the field itself, is that an amenity or a facility?
Well, the gun range is an amenity. The term gun range is an amenity.
But it also includes a facility. There's an actual building and construction there, so
And do we rent out the entire gun range?
It
Yes, we do.
happens?
Yes, we do. So I guess I'm looking at Tanyard Creek Park. You know, we do have the structure there, the pavilion, which you could consider a facility, but the trails, I don't know if you would consider I would consider that an amenity and not a facility.
Which we don't rent out. We don't rent out a trail.
But this does it does stipulate that non-members can use this area, or association guests, and then when you read further, you learn more about that. I mean, I understand, I see where you're trying to go, but I don't know if the change of a single word accomplishes that goal.
I just wouldn't want to get to the point where we decide that we want to rent something out that's an entire amenity to someone, let's say the public, and then members are not allowed to use it because it's being rented out to someone. And I know it's far-fetched to think that we would ever rent out Loch Lomond Lake, but I would have a problem with that. Somebody came along and said, I'll give you $10,000 to rent out Loch Lomond Lake for the weekend, and we say, well, we can do it, it's an amenity, we can rent it out.
I think you'd have a hard time getting that one by the board to rent out an entire lake. I have trouble envisioning that happening. I certainly wouldn't.
Do we rent out an entire recreation?
The trap range?
Let's say Branchwood, do we rent the entire facility out?
No, not to my knowledge, we never have.
Okay.
We'll rent out a room for a birthday party.
Sure, which is reasonable.
I think the gun range would be the one amenity that, for like the cancer challenge, we'll close the entire thing. But then again, typically, a lot of those types of events, we schedule them on days that the skeet and trap range is normally closed. Not always. I mean, sometimes. There are times. Okay, so here's an example that would probably fall into your category. There are times that we will close the pistol and rifle range for the police department. And that would be on a day that we would normally be open, but we do close it because they have to do qualifying every year or something like that.
A couple times a year.
So that would be an example of where we close an entire amenity and member access is completely blocked.
Jerry?
Yeah, I would like to talk about a specific area. And let's use Lake Avalon, the beach and the parking lot, the trail, the recreation facilities there, playgrounds and so on. When someone wants to reserve, what is it that they're reserving? The entire area or just a pavilion, if that's just a beach, just the new facility that was put in there?
So
The pergola, as an example. The trail group, when they reserve something, what did they reserve?
typically what they're doing is they're reserving the pavilion. And we do that for, you know, members for their birthdays and reunions and all sorts of stuff. We don't close the beach. If they want to use the beach, they would then have to interact with members. But I'm talking about, you know, so if someone reserves, I have a birthday party and I reserve the pavilion at Lake Avalon, I do not get exclusive use of the beach because I've reserved the pavilion. Other people can use the beach, and myself and my guests can use the beach, you know, paying the appropriate fee.
Okay, but under this regulation, the way it's being presented, does it not allow renting the entire area? Because it says amenity, is that the park, is that the amenity? What is the amenity that's being reserved, specific?
Well, I would answer that in a few different ways. So first of all, we historically have not done that, but you are correct that the way that it is written is possible, but we've never done that, and we don't have any plans to do that. But also, when we get to policy 3.04, it requires a vote of either a committee or the board in a public session in order to accomplish that. So it's not a situation where it can be decided upon, in the back office.
Okay, that's a question I have on that, but I'll wait to ask that on that particular one. Somewhere we must have a list of exactly what can be rented exclusively. Can that be provided to the board, please?
We could do that.
And 2.02 also says that. It says, please consult the most current fee schedule for a list of amenities that are for rent. And so that's, I think the intent was that we list that on the fee schedule, and only those things listed on the fee schedule would be available for rent. So I don't know if you want to provide a separate list for that, but we used to list them out, but they would change occasionally. So I think we went to this idea that member services would have that list.
It seems like that we continue to find different things that are not on a fee schedule, but yet we're doing these things. And so that's why I would like to just make sure everybody knows.
Yeah.
As an example, the kayak demo days and so on. We talk about, and granted, it was before this policy has been worked on, but I don't believe that was ever approved or recommended by either the Recreation Committee or the board. And maybe perhaps I'm wrong on that. It was presented to the Recreation Committee, but it was not on an agenda, so no one knew that it was coming up. But yet we say we're going to do it in a public setting. Well, then let's put them on the agendas. Let's do these things right. That's what I'm getting at. One last question on this one. And under facility reservations, it says only a member. Association guest, participant guest can actually rent a facility. Okay, is a committee then a single member? Is the POA a single member? I'm just not quite comprehending exactly how that all works.
Can you say exactly where are you reading that?
Where am I reading it?
I know here. Give me the paragraph, the
Okay.
number.
As I stated when I started, it's under facility reservation, which is reservation of amenities policy 2.02, and it's section number 2, item number 1.
Item number 1, okay. What's the problem? It spells out who may sponsor a function.
It appears as written that anybody in the world can rent a facility.
Well, anybody who's a member, an association guest, or a participant guest.
Or a committee.
Okay, I guess
Association committee, which would be members.
that's what my question is. Is a committee considered a member?
Our committees
As
are all
a-
members.
Pardon?
Our committees are composed of members.
That's correct, they are. But it's not the individual member that's making it. It's the committee. Same way as here, it's the board. Are they considered a single member? Or does it need to be broadened and consistent with the rest of the policies?
I don't see a problem, Jerry.
I know you don't.
Jerry, are you asking because that committee would then be responsible for any damage that was done during the event? Is that
That's
the
where I'm going
question?
with it, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Is that true? So just like a member that rents a facility, if the committee votes and approves something, wouldn't that mean that they're taking the liability by approving that event?
Doug, you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think it would fall on the POA. You know, if an association committee votes to allow an event, we don't make someone on the committee responsible. I think from a liability perspective, then it would fall back on the POA's liability policy if something happened.
And just to clarify, it wouldn't be possible for the committee to approve events without a member of the board knowing, because we do have representation at each committee of a board member involved. So if there was some kind of liability we felt needed to be discussed, it would be discussed at that committee meeting.
Right, yeah.
Do the board members vote on a committee recommendation at the committee meeting?
No.
So the only thing they could do is stand up and say, we have a problem here.
And take it
How
to the
would
rest
that
of the board.
affect, how would that prevent a committee from voting something in?
Because that board member, we could come back to the rest of the board and discuss it and not allow that event. We could talk to Tom about not allowing it and share our concerns.
But the way that the policies have been written, a committee has the authority to approve. It doesn't say the board can override it.
That's correct.
True, Doug, you want to?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like the board would have that ability to do that. They can vote on, the board can entertain a motion and vote on any item at a public meeting. So they could definitely bring that forward and vote on it. The board has that power. It has to be by a majority, but they could do that.
Okay. I'm afraid we're probably boring the membership with this one. I don't see that we're making much progress. We move on to the next one, which is 3.03, Tom?
I do have to stop and ask one question about 2.02 that honestly I didn't notice until today, rereading it for the 500th time. That same sentence that Hover brought up, why would we include participant guest? That's the only, I understand association guest because it actually specifies where they can reserve a facility. But I'm not seeing an example of where a participant guest should be able to reserve a facility.
I think it possibly, if we would reference the gun range again, a participant, the Poultry Federation comes in and they want to shoot clay birds.
The police department, that was a good example. I didn't think about
Yeah.
that one.
So, moving on.
I still have another question, please. May I speak?
You may.
Thank you. Okay. Asked a question earlier in this week through email that I never received any response to. And what I want to know for sure is, nowhere in these policies does it say recreational guest. Yet we continue to use recreational guest in our printed materials.
Okay, Jerry.
Is that something
That issue
Is
has
that
been addressed
something
and has been
that-
corrected.
I have the floor, please.
Get to your point.
My point is that we're not consistent. Management continues to use terms and so on that are not consistent with bylaws and governance. If we're going to continue doing that kind of thing, then we put it into the bylaws and the governance and the policies. That's my point.
Okay, now I will
So
answer
are
to
we
you.
going to continue using recreational guests?
Do you want an
If so,
answer?
I want to put it into this policy.
Do you want an answer?
Yes.
That was a mistake. It has been addressed. It will not happen again. Mistakes happen, Jerry.
Where was it addressed?
Our COO addressed the problem. I saw
When?
immediately. After it was pointed out.
Okay, I guess my email then is wrong, because I did not receive any responses to that whatsoever.
Okay.
And it was pointed out earlier this year, that same term was used, and we were told at that time it was a mistake. It's not going to be used again. Again, this week it comes out again.
And the mistake happened. That's why it's called a mistake, Jerry. The intention is that it will not happen again. That's all I can say, is that it's not supposed to be phrased that way, and the intention is that it will not. Moving on to 303.
On this one, approximately a year, actually probably more like 2 years ago, the Lakes Committee made a recommendation for dependent card holders that we limit the number of guests that they can bring to 5. And this is to address some of the challenges that we have at some of the dams where a lake ranger would come up and there would be 30 kids, and one would have a photo ID card, because I'm talking about last year, and the dependent photo ID card member would then just say, well, all 30 of these kids are my buddies, and all 30 can stay. And that's just not reasonable. The Lakes Committee made this recommendation to limit it to 5, which will give our lake rangers a little bit more control in these situations.
And I just want to remind members that adults, members, can still order as many member cards as they need.
Yeah,
This
there-
is only limiting dependents. I've had a lot of people ask that question and
Yeah,
be
it-
concerned.
Oh, yeah, it is only for the dependents. If an adult activity card holder was with the dependent, and there's 30 kids, then they can, that's allowed. They gotta get guest passes and so forth, but there's no limitation.
And the parent is responsible for any damage that those 30 kids do.
Exactly. So we think this is, we received input from property owners that are being negatively impacted by these large groups of kids. We received input from the lake rangers on what they needed to, be more effective in controlling these situations. And then the Lakes Committee considered this and voted to recommend it, so we feel it's reasonable. Any questions?
Should help out the rangers enforcing.
I think so. The next one is 3.04, and I actually have 2 slides on this one, so if you can let me get through the 2 slides, and then we can address some questions, because I think there's been some confusion regarding these changes on Facebook. So first of all, it clarifies the different guest categories. So the first one is sponsored guests, And so these would be guests of members. So my brother or sister is coming out. I'm a member. I'm going to sponsor them. I'm going to get guest passes for them. Those would be sponsored guests. Association guests would be guests of the POA. Now, I referenced that when you look at 3.04 and 2.02, those kind of go hand in hand because there are limitations imposed regarding the association guests on 2.02. Reciprocal guests are those guests of Cooper, and this is required in the governing documents. And we do get some guests that come up, and then we also have property owners that actually go down to hot springs and so forth and use their amenities. And then participant guests with special permission for certain events. And I want to go into a little bit more detail on that. Clarifies access to the amenities, grants the board and association committees limited ability to allow special events. So a good example, we have the Cancer Challenge. So the Cancer Challenge comes in, they'll use the entire skeet and trap field. It's a very good, worthwhile event. Often when we have these types of events like the Cancer Challenge, we try and schedule them on days that the range would normally be closed. That way there is zero impact for our property owners. Another one is the Kayak Demo Day, and actually this did come up earlier the year with the Recreation Committee, and they did actually vote on this to make that recommendation. And so the Kayak Demo Day, we get about 600 people that attend this event. Our best guesstimate is about 90% of those attendees are property owners, and they come out, and we're seeing over the last several years, the number of kayaks that are being registered by the POA just going through the roof, just going through the roof. And another one would be the high school skeet team. So the high schoolers may or may not live here. No action has been taken on the high school skeet team. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, action has been taken on this one. But the high school team member may or may not be a property owner. But it's in some ways similar to we are the home golf course for several high school golf teams also. It's a way of supporting the community. So what's interesting is in reading some of the comments on Facebook, I wanted to point out how much more aggressive our lake rangers have been this year as a result of the 2020 plan. And you can argue that the vote was approved in middle of January, and I'm using stats from the 1st of January, but it still paints the same picture. So from January 1 through June 15th of 2019, we removed 409 people. Now, we didn't physically remove them. We asked them politely to leave. We removed 409 non-members from the lakes and the parks. This year, that increase, that number of people has gone up dramatically, 2,408. They're much more aggressive in removing people. So you have almost a 600% increase in the number of people being asked to leave. So when I see comments where the board is trying to look for a workaround, that is just not factual. What we're looking for is some level of flexibility. Cancer Challenge happens once a year. The Kayak Demo Day happens once a year. I think the high schoolers shoot 8 times. I could be wrong on that. The police department shoots, I think, twice a year for qualifying. So we're looking for a reasonable amount of flexibility. I recognize that your example, and I'm not picking on you, but we can always find extreme examples. Anytime you write any rules, I think you can find an extreme example. The renting of all of Loch Lomond is something we would never do. I mean, it would have to be approved by a committee, and that committee would be.
Glad we got that on record.
You know, I just, you know, yeah, okay, but yeah, it's, yes, you can probably find any rule, any law, and find some extreme situation where it's going to fall apart. But I think this demonstrates how active it is. And Rick Eccles, who's in charge of our lake rangers, he sent me the numbers for today. He sent them this morning. And in the last week, so this is not included in these numbers, in the last week we've had an additional 231 individuals removed. And what we hope is that, you know, what Rick is doing is he's trying to get the rangers to be polite but very aggressive, and through that, hopefully we're educating people. So we might actually, and hopefully we do, we see the number of removals go down next year because people are going to go, I can't go there anymore, you know. And what's not included in this number is the people that go, the non-members that go to the beach, and they're getting turned away. And other places where they're saying, no, really sorry, you know, sorry you wasted the trip, but you can't come in. Those numbers, the ones that the recreation team are turning away, are not included in that. So the numbers would actually be higher. So I think it's important to these are facts. We have logs. We track this. You know, we're much more aggressive. Questions?
You said you had a second slide?
That was the second slide.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this 304, I think, is one of the policies that we really need to get in place to help our people control access. Next Thursday will be the second reading, and then it will be official policy at that point. There may or may not be, you know, as we've talked about these things, there may be adjustments made to the policies and bylaws. If you go back on the website and read the minutes of the meetings for past years, constantly policies and bylaws being adjusted, so it's not something unusual to adjust things as we learn and the situation changes. So don't think that this is written in stone and it will stay that way forever. It's something that we can adjust in the future. So with that being said,
I actually added a slide.
you got another one?
Yeah.
Oh.
On an unrelated.
That's what I thought.
Okay. So, wanted to, actually, I sent this information to the board a few days ago. There's been some comments on Facebook about the 2040 plan and so forth. So I wanted to make some clarification regarding that, and I apologize for the small print and there's a lot of detail. In 2017, I personally served on the Citizens Advisory Committee. This committee was made up of 11 different individuals. One of the other individuals was a representative of Cooper Communities. You know, the board encouraged me to participate, and I was there to advise and advocate on behalf of the POA. Last week at the June 11th City Council meeting, they discussed the 2040 plan. A few people have said that I endorse the plan. So I called the mayor and asked him if he had used those words, and he said he had not. You know, that I participated and I provided information, because when you talk about the city and the POA, it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other. I even had Tammy watch the entire meeting to confirm that the mayor never said I endorsed it. So that being said, in 2017, when I was on the committee, I provided my input on behalf of the POA on some things I agreed with, some things I disagreed with, and I shared those opinions with them at that time. My biggest concern was it appeared at that time that there was little to no buy-in from Cooper at that time, and so many of these, some of the things that they wanted to accomplish in this 2040 plan required Cooper's involvement. So that was my biggest concern, and I voiced that concern at that time. So I've never endorsed the plan, never even been asked to endorse the plan, but I do think it was a good idea that I participated in the Citizens Advisory Council Committee.
Thank you for clarifying that, Tom. I'd like to go back to policy 3.04 so that we could discuss it a little bit. These policies do need to be changed to reflect what was promised in the 2020 plan. And I do have a real problem with the last section regarding participant guests, because we did promise the members that lakes, recreation facilities, and gun ranges would be for member use only. And we're listing in there fishing tournaments, gun tournaments. And I know you're asking for flexibility so that some things can be allowed, but that's not what was promised.
Do you mind if I jump in?
I do not mind.
One thing that, and we had spoken about this, so you've already heard me say this, but I wanted to say this for the community. We wanted to be very upfront about needing some level of flexibility. So in September, when we first started talking about the 2020 plan, and we first had the webpage about the 2020 plan, there was a lengthy Q&A, and I actually wrote it. So when I say I put it in there, it's because I actually wrote that portion of it. Talked about like the cancer challenge, and that we would have to have some level of flexibility. And I wanted to include that all the way back in September of last year, because I didn't want a situation where people thought we were not being forthright, and that we didn't mention that we need some limited degree of flexibility. So I included that, and I included examples in there, and you know, whether anybody read it or not, I don't know if they read it, but it was provided, and you know, because I didn't want people to think that we were doing a bait and switch, and that we wanted to be upfront and say, hey, you know, we still want to have the cancer challenge, we still want to have the demo day, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to have non-members that are not guests using the beach. We don't want to have non-members, you know, pulling in that Tyree Park and jumping on the lake. You know, our rangers need to go out there and remove them like we're doing. And so I feel that we've been forthright with the community. Now, whether anybody read that information, I can provide the information, but I can't force someone to read it.
And I understand what you're saying, and I started to buy into that. However, then I got out my ballot that I received in the mail and the information that I received in the mail, and the frequently asked questions are not in here. So if I don't live here, or if I didn't go to the POA site, I would not be aware of any of that. So I almost feel what was sent to the members with their ballot to vote is what our contract was.
Well, it does give a link to the webpage, though, and it does state something like for more information or something of that nature.
And I have had several people tell me that they only voted for this because they wanted things to be private. The lakes, the recreation centers, the gun range. And my fear is if we don't uphold that promise, because in my book, no means no. No public means no public. If we don't uphold those promises, the next time we go out and ask for an assessment, they're going to say, well, no, you promised us this, you didn't give it to us, and so now we're not going to support the next assessment. That's my thought on it. So I can't vote for 3.04 the way that it's written, and I think it should be reworked.
Tia?
I really hear you, and I completely understand, because I've had the same members calling me, I've had them emailing me, I've seen the Facebook pages that say, we're going back on what we promised. The reason I do support 3.04 is this participants guest section, it is controversial, and members do think we're going back on what we said. However, if you think about it in the fact that that does not take the privatization of our amenities away in any way, just because we have a handful of events that we want to control does not mean we're going back on what we promised. If we took out this entire section of participant guest, those events are still going to happen. They're members that go to those events. The fishing tournaments are still going to happen. The kayak demo day is still going to happen. There's going to be a member that's going to sponsor it because members want those events. Just because there are guests there does not mean that those events are not for the members. So they'll still happen. So in my opinion, if we took out participant guest, we would be opening it up for anything to come in and any member to sponsor an event like they already can without any semi-control of knowing they're happening. I would at least like to know and have the committee looking at it, having the board looking at it, and approving them. I just think it's an additional service to the member to make it easier to have fun events like that.
Well, members can have a fishing tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Members can. I don't think that you're going to have a lot of members willing to step up to sponsor a fishing tournament that the public's going to come into, because that member's going to be responsible for any damage that's done.
I agree with that.
It's true.
So I don't see it as it's going to happen anyway. I don't think it's going to happen. And from a risk perspective, the more of the public you let into an area, a facility, whatever you want to call it, the more chances there's going to be damage done. That's just a fact of life.
So are you saying you don't want to have any events that have public come in at all? You don't want fishing tournaments, you don't want the cancer challenge?
I want members to have what we promised them. Members can have fishing tournaments. I do not want the public coming in and having a fishing tournament. I'm pulling more and more trash out of Loch Lomond Lake. I feel as if members who have something at stake, it's their property, they treat it better than the public does.
True.
I don't think a lot of members are going to go out and pollute the lakes. But I think you have somebody come in who's not paying for the dues, they're not buying the fish that are stocked in the lake. I don't think that they treat it as well as a member does.
Sandy, don't forget that in order for a member to have a fishing tournament, all of those participants will have to be registered. They'll either have to accompany a member in the member's boat, or they will have to register their own watercraft to be on the lake. So we will know who they are. It's not like people are just walking in and throwing their boats on the lake. It doesn't happen that way. And I think the real proof of this will be in the application. We have no intention of throwing Bella Vista open to the public in any way, shape, or form. We're being accused of that, trying to find a workaround. We're not. We're trying to live up to what we said we would do. Give us a year under our belts to find out the real effect of the 2020 plan, and we can always make adjustments down the road. But we need to get 304 in force as quickly as we can to to limit as much as we can right now. It may not be perfect, but at the end of the year, we can look at it and we can readdress it.
Let me share, I'm sorry.
Go
Did I
ahead.
cut you off? All right. Because I think that I see your viewpoint. So let me share with you a conversation I had with Rick Eccles earlier this week. Because we were talking about 3.04 and events and so forth. And he was asking me about some of the events, and so I'm going to pick on two. I said, now I can't speak for the board and I can't speak for a committee, but based upon how this is written, I think there's a good chance that next year we would do the kayak demo day because 90% of the people are members that attend. With that being said, I told Rick, I don't think we're going to have the kayak fishing tournaments because the member participation on those events is much lower. And so I can't see the committee approving that where the other one I can. So I was very honest with him and said, look, I think that what the board is trying to do is, I see your point of view and I see Tia's point of view, and I think they're trying to hit the middle.
I think, though, in listening to some of the past committee meetings in regard to these things, the Lakes Committee was very much in favor of kayak fishing tournaments. Very much. You don't think so?
Oh, no. I'm just saying, I don't think with the passage of, assuming it gets passed, I don't think it's something that the committee would approve.
So you don't think they'll have any kayak fishing tournaments?
Oh, I'm talking about the one specific kayak fishing tournament which we had several of last year, which were the member participation was low. That specific one, and I'm probably really upsetting one of the committee Lakes Committee members in saying this. I don't see that. But if it's a member is bringing a kayak fishing tournament to us and it's 4 members, then that's it. But I'm talking about a specific kayak fishing tournament that had been approved by the Lakes Committee last year. I can't see that getting approved in the coming year.
I just would like to see the committees show an attitude that they understand the 2020 plan. So, you know, I guess there was a Recreation Committee meeting where it didn't appear as if one of the committee members cared that there were the public in places where they shouldn't be. And I just hope that we're getting, as a board, I hope we're getting across to the committees that, you know, the lakes, the recreation facilities, and the gun range is meant to be for members, and it's meant to be private.
So based upon that, if this were to be approved, maybe the directive from the board is, Tom, at all of the next committee meetings, we would like you to go over these new policy changes and make sure you convey the board's expectations of them, and be honest. Okay, and let's use the example, the kayak fishing tournament, you know, probably not something you want to approve. I can't speak for the committee. I don't want to squash anybody's voice. But for the kayak demo day, probably one that you would want to approve. But I have no problem if the board would want me to make sure I do that, because in one of the coming months we're going to have to do the committee orientation, which is what we do every year. I can fold that into the committee orientation training.
I think it's a really good idea. Because Sandy, I'm definitely not arguing with you on your viewpoint on that, because I hear it, I see it, I understand it completely. And it's going to be on us. This next year in 2020, it's on the board to do what he's saying, give direction, speak up at the committee meetings. Hopefully this gets more members coming to the committee meetings too, that feel like you do, that want to be there to ensure these things are upheld. We need more members. We need us to speak up. We all got to work together.
Well, and I do think the board is responsible for what gets approved, and so that was the reason why I also had a problem with listing that the committees could approve these things.
I can see that.
I think the committees can recommend approval to the board.
No, that's
No,
not
it
how it's
says
written.
in this policy that they can approve it, so. You know, now
But
you're
giving them
expecting
some
members to not
flexibility
only
is
watch
good.
board
The
meetings,
board
but
can
you're
always
expecting
overrule.
them to watch every move that a committee makes.
Yeah, the board can always overrule.
Pardon me, I didn't hear.
I said the board can always overrule.
Right, so
The
a
board
board
is
member
above the
at the
committee.
committee has to bring it to the attention of the board
Well,
and put it on an agenda in order to get it overruled, and the event may have already happened by then.
No, what we're planning on doing is, and this is something else I was speaking with Rick about, is I envision that we would want to seek approval for these different special events early in the year, months beforehand. Have, you know, the kayak fishing, the kayak demo day is typically in May or June this year. We would want to go in front of the Lakes Committee in January. Let's plan out the year. Here's all the events. Let's talk about it at that time. You know, so I do not envision a situation where they would do it at the last minute to slip it by the board. I just don't see that happening.
we do have the board liaison members on the committees. If there's something a little off, you know, they would bring it, I would hope that they would bring it immediately to the board, to the COO, and we could address those things. The COO also attends almost all of those committee meetings and frequently gives direction to the committee when they're talking about certain items. So,
And Jerry touched on something earlier. I honestly don't know if when the rec committee was talking about the cancer challenge, and so forth. I don't know. I honestly don't remember if it was on the agenda, but to your point, it should be. So come January, when we're going through, assuming this is approved, it's got to be on the agenda so the community can know that they're going to consider that. So I would, so they did vote on that one item, but I honestly don't remember if it was in the agenda, and it should have been. If it wasn't, it should have been.
So how many events have already been scheduled for this year?
Oh, we got we do have the kayak demo day. Tammy, jump in if I forget.
cancer.
The cancer challenge was approved, but that it's been delayed and may get canceled.
Poultry canceled.
We've had a lot of cancellations because of COVID.
Yeah. The high schoolers have been approved, but I don't know if they're gonna have their events.
And the high schoolers, that was a monthly thing or 10 times a year, or what did you say?
I think it's 10 times a year. I'm not positive exactly how many times. It's a number of shoots. I picked 10 because I think it's a high number. I think it's lower than that, but I don't know for certain.
The fishing derby.
What's the fishing derby?
For kids.
Yeah, that's been delayed. That was normally takes place in May.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that, isn't it? Everything's gotten delayed.
And who knows if we're gonna have it in August, you know.
Paddleboard camp.
Correct?
Is the paddleboard camp held at the beach?
Yes.
And so is the beach closed when the lessons are going on?
I don't honestly know what time the classes are at. I think they're before the beach opens, but I honestly do not know what time the classes start.
Because, like I said, the one thing that concerns me is any time that we're allowing the public in and it's making members stay out. You know, like if the
No.
beach was closed because,
No, we don't do that.
Jerry?
I mean, I like the classes. I think they're wonderful. I do have a problem, though, in not knowing where the money goes that is collected for the classes, and in particular, the paddleboard one. That's rather expensive. Same way with the golf classes and so on. You know, they're using POA facilities and so on, and checks are made out to the instructor, not to POA. So why can we not get some revenues from these that are done that way?
Fair question.
I can have Joan come in and give us a report at the next GM meeting.
Okay. And absolutely, can you attest that the instructors for the paddleboard are members?
For the panel, yes, I've been told that they are the members.
Okay. But the participants may not be.
May or may not be, that's correct.
Can Joan also bring any other events that are coming up?
I'm sorry I missed that.
Can Joan also bring up other events that might be coming up, like the paddleboard camp or anything? Since we haven't talked about any events in so long, can she just give us a list of what might be coming?
Sure.
yeah, I'd like a list of all the events that have already been scheduled for this year,
We can do that.
if there are more than what I've written down.
I can give you a comprehensive list, just to recognize that this is an unusual year.
All right.
Yeah, what a strange year.
It may or may not happen.
There are several events on the POA weekly newsletter that they email. Like there's yoga on the beach, there's a tennis camp.
Tennis is open to the public, so that wouldn't be an issue.
The yoga
It's junior
is-
tennis camp, that's what it says.
The
Are they-
yoga, I wouldn't, I mean, I can include the yoga, but that is for people that are members.
Okay,
That is members only.
That's members only. And the different classes that we have at the fitness center, those are members only. Or if you have a guest card.
Right, right.
A question I have is how does, if I wanted to teach a class on something or other, how do I go about doing that? Am I prevented from, or?
I'm sorry, Jerry, I didn't understand what you said.
Okay, we have different instructors that are doing classes and so on. How are those instructors selected, for one question? And who decides what class is going to be taught and what isn't? In other words, could a maintenance person teach a class on irrigation? I mean, it's just throwing something out that way. Can other people, I've got a class I want to do, Firewise is a particular one. I've used to teach Firewise. Okay, is that something that I can petition to, and who do I petition to do that?
So-
And who selects how much fee there is?
So what I'll do is I'll bring Joan to the next GM meeting. I can tell you is that where a license or permit is required, we require it. So if you need to be, you have to be a certified yoga instructor, you know, and we get a copy of the certificate to make sure that they're a certified yoga instructor. Those types of things. We offer different types of fitness classes, and they have to be certified in those specific areas by whatever the governing body is. But I can bring Joan in, and we can ask her, and you can ask those exact questions. Sounds like you're getting a little bit more creative in some of the classes offered. We've offered cooking classes. We've had our chef do cooking classes. At my last place, we had some people doing art classes and so forth. So we can definitely get more creative. For the golf instructions, we have PGA professionals giving, you know, Class A professionals, PGA and LPGA professionals giving those. So they have the right certification and the right qualifications in order to give those classes. So it's not just some individual off the street giving the golf lessons, it's a certified professional.
It's a good question. I actually had a member that was really sweet reach out on Facebook just yesterday asking who he would contact if he wanted to take out elderly members of our community fishing and help them fish for if they were less mobile than others. And I just thought it was the sweetest thing to ever ask that he wanted to go do. And I referred him to asked if he'd come to the rec committee and talk about it.
Okay. The next item on the forum is a little different with the unusual times we're living in. We have the open forum, property owner comments. Normally, our property owners are in the same room with us. Right now, that's not possible to do that. We have one person who has signed up to speak for the membership. If you have comments that you would like the board to consider, please email board@bvvpoa.com. I can assure you that the board members do read and consider all emails. Responses are sent back when appropriate. So if you don't feel comfortable coming into a session with a lot of other people, email will work. At this time, we have Ken Nelson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
And that's probably my primary purpose this morning. The meeting opened up by having my conversation swept under the carpet. Doesn't surprise me. We sent in 23 emails. We sent them into the POA board, and they got, boom, right under the carpet. They were ignored, categorically dismissed, and it was in violation of my personal First Amendment rights. And I was stoked, okay? As were my 22 counterparts and a lot of other people. We've been disconnected because of this coronavirus thing, and it's really put things on tilt. The membership is not being represented. Things are happening that are just not consistent with good common sense. And I wanted to address the 528 and 514 conversations. 514 I just addressed. We got a pseudo apology in a couple of days. Oh, we goofed up. Sorry about that. But we're sorry we didn't read them. But we're not sorry. We're not changing any policies. We're not addressing any issues. And we really don't care. I brought with me Mr. McKee's. I got to go back just a step. I went ahead and filed a misconduct allegation. Unfortunately, I had to name the entire existing board because citing the former chair who was 2 steps out the door didn't make any sense. So in my allegation, I had to cite the entire board. I apologize for those who had other positions. However, that said, you know, nothing really I got a vanilla answer. Nobody got any answers on anything. When I filed that allegation, the first 3 things that went on that allegation form was my name, my address, and my phone number, period. to come into this meeting just now, my name and my address. But we got a guy that got stiffed. He got 5,600 votes. He got his butt kicked off the board because he fell in disfavor with the sentiment of the day. I'm trying to dress this thing up, okay? But my name went on my complaint. We got allegations. Our guy that got kicked off said one of the allegations came from a sitting board member. Okay. Liar, liar, pants on fire, nose as long as a telephone wire? Or do I shout 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 at him? I have no reason to discount Steve's accusations. None whatsoever. He's a stand-up guy. I don't even know the guy beyond a handshake. But I follow him on Facebook. I followed his activities with the board. And anything that was his opinion, he took ownership of. He said, I may be in disagreement with the rest of the board, but I'm taking ownership of this.
David, you gotta stop.
Two guys.
Ken, your 3 minutes is up.
Well, then tell me to shut up and go home.
We have read your emails. We have read the emails of your other 22, and
answered
we have
nothing.
we have considered the emails.
Yeah, he
Thank
was
you for
considered
taking the time to come in today.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. I wish you all the best. I don't know who's going to be next. I have a differing opinion. So have a nice day.
Hey, Ken,
Yeah.
Tia, I just wanted to say thank you for sending your email, and we did read it, we did
I
get
know
your
you did.
allegation, and it will be addressed, though, I do want you to know. It's not this meeting, but it will be.
Well,
And
the 514 meeting, there was no sense of urgency for that.
I don't know about that meeting, but I do want to openly apologize to you.
Nobody
I
else
know you
out there.
said that the apology from us
There is
isn't
nobody else out there.
heartfelt or didn't mean anything. I know you feel that way, but I want you to know that as a board, we did discuss it, and we are sorry. We did make a mistake.
I understand.
We know that.
My real issue, I didn't have enough time to go into, but the 514 meeting should not have happened. It could happen in June, new board, but it didn't.
Thanks, Ken.
Kevin Dooley?
Kevin Dooley, Lester Drive. I just had a couple of comments. I hadn't planned to speak, but I wanted to follow up on something Sandy brought up. I'm not sure the message is getting through that our lakes and other things should be private, because at the June 8th Rec Committee meeting, Gary Griffin said that he found 15 people that he thought were non-members on the lake, and he didn't do anything about it. So maybe that message needs to get through more strongly so that everyone knows that the lakes are private. The second thing I wanted to bring up was something that Tom brought up, and that was the June 11th City Council special work session. Tom is correct that the mayor did not say that Tom was in on the 2040 plan. It was Graham Smith who said that. So it was said, but it wasn't by the mayor. I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
So I watched that section, and he never used the word endorse. He said that I participated and that he asked me questions, but he never used the word endorse. And that would not be factual. If he had used that word, it would not have been factual. But I watched that. He didn't use the word endorse.
Yeah, I don't recall the exact words, but they were words to that effect. Like you were participatory, you were on board. I haven't seen it for a week, so I don't know exactly what he said. I'm just trying to clarify that it was brought up and it indicated, and it made people suspicious, including myself, because, Tom is doing this thing that nobody knows about until tonight. So that's why I brought it up. It wasn't just out of the blue that people believed that perhaps you were, in on something that nobody knows about. It was indicated. Maybe the word endorsed wasn't used, but that's the impression that I and many other people got. So that's all. Thanks.
Well, he did not use the word endorse, but that has been stated over and over again on Facebook, and that's not factual. I encourage you to re-watch the meeting. Yes, I participated. Yes, because I helped educate them on the viewpoints of the POA.
I've been on the board 3 years. I have never heard anything about 2040, so the board is absolutely not involved in it. As Tom said in his presentation, as the POA, our reservations about anything that the city may be dreaming about and hoping and planning, for the future, it has to involve the developer, Cooper Communities. And if Cooper does not endorse something, it's pretty much not going to happen. That's the way the community is set up. So if you want something to happen, that's how it works. So we, as a POA, are not endorsing it. We're watching and seeing what the city does just like everybody else. So perhaps someone was trying to stir up trouble by saying that Tom and the POA has endorsed it and we've done something behind their backs. We haven't. We don't endorse it. We're learning about it just along with everybody else. So that being said, Jerry.
I have a suggestion that it seems like it could be a very good service to our membership, because they're all affected, that we host a work session, a board agenda item, whether it be during the work session, the evening session, and spend quality time on that plan, so that we as a board understand what's in it from the perspective of a committee member that was there, as well as our membership could understand it a little bit better. Thank you.
I think it's the responsibility of the city to talk about the 2040 plan. It's their plan.
I do think, though, if you've looked at that at all, a lot of the areas that the city is planning is POA property, such as Burksdale South. And I don't think that we, as a board, should sit back and allow the city to make a plan like that if it's something that neither Cooper nor the POA have any intention of going through with. Otherwise, we end up with a situation where members are told years from now, well, those maps have been available for years. You should have known that this is what was going to happen. So I don't think that we can sit back and not be involved at all.
Yes, I have to disagree with you, Tom. I think it's something that we really should be involved in, because it does affect our entire membership. It affects our properties and so on. So it's a terrible disgrace if we don't do it.
Well, Jerry, we are involved in it in that we work with Cooper Communities, and anything that would be proposed for POA property would absolutely come before us. And so we are involved, and if the city chooses not to inform us until an open council meeting about something that they're going to propose, that's not on us, that's on them. So I don't want to pick a fight with the city. Moving on, the announcements. Our Board of Directors regular session is next Thursday, the 25th of June at 6 p.m. right here in the boardroom. The GM meeting, Tuesday, July 7 at 4:30 p.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club. That is a different time and date. That is a closed meeting. The Board of Directors work session, Thursday, July 17 at 9 a.m. in the boardroom, Country Club. And the Board of Directors regular session for July will be the 23rd, 6 p.m. in the boardroom. And that being said,
Tom, can we make this presentation, is this going to be on the website in the meeting notes or anything we can share?
We can.
I think it's good to have that on the website for members to see your slides.
Sounds good.
We are adjourned. Jerry?
Dan had something before you
On the GM meeting, did you need the list on there that we're going to have interviews that afternoon before?
That's closed.
That's closed? Okay.
Yeah, the interviews will, there's not a time frame because at this time we don't know how many we will have. It might take us 2 days. We don't know.
Oh.